Now that we got some of the basics out of the way, let's get on to the fun stuff and actually create something. Now we're going to create a car mirror. Now there is an example file that's provided for you guys called car mirror. Now this is one that you see here in the image. NURBS freeform is on the left side here, and then the converted BREP's on the right. Now this is by no means an exact copy of what's on the blueprint. It's only there's a representation for you to play with. Now we're going to follow the same process, and I want to show you guys some of the pitfalls to watch out for so we can get a good understanding of some of the best ways to work with these surfaces. So let's go ahead and hop into Inventor. So I have the file car blueprints open. It contains front, back, side, and top views. We want to start by hiding the back, and we're going to go ahead and create a form. So this area here, create form, has obviously the face, the convert, and the primitives. Now for us, the primitive we're going to use is box, and then it asks us to select a plane. You can choose either the front or the top plane, but I'm going to go ahead and select the XY plane, or the front plane. I'm going to look at the front view, I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to place a box roughly centered where the mirror is. We're going to go ahead and make this 1.75 tall, 1 wide, and we're going to leave 1 high for now. We're going to leave the divisions at 2 for each direction and say OK. On your toolbar here, we want to make sure we go to Tools and Toggle Translucency so we can see through the model. Now, we're not going to be trying to replicate this mirror. I'm just going to show you some of the problems that we're going to run into when you start to work with freeform models, and then we're going to scrap it and we're going to start from scratch, and I'm going to show you some of the easier ways to work with them. So at first, when people start in this type of environment with the sub-D modeling, the first instinct is to make as many subdivisions as they can, so that way they have the most amount of detail. But unfortunately, that's probably the worst thing you can do, because it's going to be very hard to control those models. It's always the best practice, in my mind, to start out with the least number of subdivisions you can. Generally the 2, 2, and 2 when you're dealing with a box model. It's going to be good enough to get started on just about anything. So what people tend to start with is something like this model. And first you'll notice that it's placed on this plane. We need to mask select everything, go to Edit Form. We're going to grab the arrow and simply drag it down to where the mirror is. And then we're going to use the widgets on the screen. And there's one here that allows us to rotate it. It's going to be about 25 degrees. And then we're going to say OK. So now that it's positioned appropriately, what does this mean for us? Well, the first thing it means is that this model is now 25 degrees off of our coordinate system, which makes it a whole lot more difficult for us to control. Of course, when we're using the Edit Form option, we can recalibrate the coordinate system to be local to our selection. So if we use the local option, you notice that it's oriented 25 degrees off, and that's perfect, except when you start to select multiple things. It's always based on the first selection. So keep that in mind, that the local coordinate system is different than the world coordinate system, and sometimes that can be good, sometimes it can be bad. The next thing that people run into when they start dealing with these models is they get a little overzealous with moving things. Now they might want to crease the edges and start to add some divisions, and we're going to go through that process so you can start to understand the pitfalls. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to turn translucency back off so it's a little bit easier for us to see. I then am going to hold down the Control key and select all the loops around the front face. I'm going to use Crease Edge to pull them out, and then I'm going to use Flatten to make sure that they're all flattened. Now with Flatten, you need to have at least 4 vertices before it starts to average between them. You do have 2 other options where you can flatten to a plane, or you can flatten parallel to a plane. In this case, if we had a plane that was at 25 degrees, it would be perfect for us. But for us, we don't. We're just going to flatten the vertices so that they're averaged. Alright, so you might think that we're starting to get somewhere with the shape. The next thing to do is either match it to the top view or match it to the front view. So if we go to our top view and zoom in, we want to taper it down, to about this area right here. So one thing that we can do is we can Control select some faces, go back to our top view, and then we can edit the form and scale them. So I'm going to scale them in one direction only. I want to make sure that I scale them here. But you'll notice that what's happening is it's not actually moving the back edge at all. So we're going to undo this, and instead we'll control select these faces and we'll scale them in one direction. So again, we'll have to go back to a top view, and as we scale these down, you notice that it'll bring in the back edge, but it's also taking the front edge out. So it's not actually doing the type of thing that we want it to do. But if instead we grab and we move some of these faces, and then before we're complete, we want to rotate them just a little bit. Now it might be hard to see because of the blueprint, but if we scale out a little bit, we can rotate those faces and then maybe move them in just a little bit more. That's starting to get the shape that we want. You will notice that we did introduce some extra curvature here in this corner. That was obviously an accidental thing. So we want to go ahead and move them out in two directions, maybe pull it out so we get that curvature back, and then we're okay.